Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline Magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the big interview. Today I'm with Phil McCormack, the managing director, the owner, the big cheese, the big wheel, whatever you want to call it. He got the job by accident at Gloucester's oldest continually owned family business, Nicks Timber on Bristol Road. Hi, Nick.
Hiya.
Really great to see you again. I've known you for quite some time, actually, because I live just down the road, and I think it's around maybe 18 years, and we normally see each other nowadays in Lidl.
We do.
Yeah. We do the old days. Anyway, tell us a little bit about Nicks Timber, please.
Nicks has been around since 1856. It's had a number of owners over its long period of time, but mainly the Drury family have run it for the last 3 generations until I came along and bought it for them. Before that, it was Nicks and Baxter. We think we're the oldest continually owned family business in the county, but no doubt somebody seeing this will be in touch to say we're not, which would be nice to know. In the good old days, Gloucester was the furthest inland timber port in the UK. And when I came to Gloucester in about mid-80s, there were 11 timber companies in this city, all around the dockhead, all up the Bristol Road, all backing onto the Sharpness Canal, which is where, of course, all the wood used to come in through the Sharpness docks and then up through the canal and then dispatched straight onto the yards that were here. And then from here onto train tracks that still exist in our yard today. And from there up to the railhead, and then from there up to Birmingham and Leicester. So Gloucester was, in the early 1900s, a real hub of Gloucester timber activity. And we serviced the Midlands from here. Now, sadly, sadly for them, very good for us, Nicks is actually the only pure oil timber importer left in the city, which, as I say, it's not a bad place to be when you were competing with 10 others. Now we just compete with ourselves.
That's it. So you've seen off all the competitors. Turnovers 5.5 million quid last year, you said to me earlier, and you employed 27 people. Back in the 1800s or 1900s, whatever, how many people were employed then at Nicks? Must have been hundreds.
Well, funnily enough, one of the old MDs came in only at the beginning of this week because he's downsizing his house, and he brought a lot of memorabilia in that he got at home. One of those items was a picture taken in 1916 of the workforce, all in cloth caps. And what is striking about that picture is, first of all, there's about 60 of them. But if you look at them in detail, there are 14 to 17-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds, and then 50 to 65-year-olds. And all of the middle age group is missing because, of course, they all went off to war. So it was, you mentioned Lidl. Of course, Nicks's was twice the physical size then as it is today because we sold Lidl the land to build Lidl. That was part of our yard. So it was twice the size, about a 6-acre site, and had a very modern mill in its day. It had its own steam-driven machinery here, and those people who have been in Gloucester for many years will remember Nicks Chimney, which was the chimney that sat on the Bristol Road on this site with Nicks written down it, was a landmark in the city for generations. Drive down the road when you see Nicks Timber, turn left. It was one of those. So yeah, the company is woven into Gloucester's history. Mr. Nicks, the original Mr. Nicks, was in fact a mayor of Gloucester and also a co-founder of the Gloucester Wagon Works. Because being entrepreneurial, and if you think back when wagons were first built for the railways, of course, they were heavy timber construction. It was a steel frame with timber sides. So if you're a timber merchant in Gloucester and railways are coming, you're going to open up a wagon works that uses a lot of wood, and that's what he did, bless him. And as I say,
the Nicks, road, wasn't it? That was just down the road by.
Yeah, it's where the go-kart centre is now, at opposite Aldi. If we're going to talk supermarkets,
that's how we geographically pinpoint things now. Opposite Moreland Trading Estate, isn't it? That's where
that's
wagon works, isn't it? People don't realise, and the railway line ran along there. And where the road swoops round by Gloucester Park, and it goes next to where Robert's Limbricks is, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah,
so the whole thing connected together, because that was a wagon. I think Robert Limbricks was a a wagon showcase. That's where it was a showroom, like our car showroom nowadays.
Yeah. And of course, you mentioned Moorlands. Of course, the match factory was a massive user of wood as well. And the logs used to sit in a log pond just off the canal. So they were kept wet before they were brought into the factory to be turned into matches. So Gloucester has a massive timber connection, or had. It's not so buoyant now, but massive timber connection in the UK history of our industry.
So talking about Nicks now, then, what do you guys actually do now? Because I drive past, so I'll be honest with you, mate, I haven't been in for a little while because there's only so many, fence panels you need. But people always assume they know you, isn't it? Because they drive past forever, say, "Oh, there's Nicks Timber," but what do you actually do?
Well, I think if you've been, we've been here longer than anybody alive in the city. So if you've driven past the gate since you were year dot, you tend not to look when you drive by because it's just part of your infrastructure. That was really how I got involved with the business, because it was on its third generation. Nothing had really been updated. They had the massive fire, you might remember, back in the late 80s, early 90s, which had destroyed a big part of the yard, which is why Lidl's ended up getting that piece of ground, actually. But the people that were running it hadn't really. It's a typical third generation story, clogs to clogs in a way. And as much as granddad's entrepreneurial, he teaches dad and 3 sons. The 4 of them run it very well. Their kids all go to university. And what comes into the business tends to be the ones that don't go on to be doctors, lawyers and solicitors. And they tend to run it then the way their dads have run it. And the world moved on, and Nicks has found itself a little bit old-fashioned, really. And in fact, if you'd asked me when I first came to Gloucester, I worked for a company called Williams and Farmer, which was very cutting-edge modern timber trade on the other side of the river, what is now a housing estate. If you'd asked me which company was going to survive and which company was going to go, I probably would have said Nicks would have been the first. And in fact, Nicks's was the last. Partly because it is family owned, they own the site. It's a cheap company to run in that respect. And when I got involved here, I actually came and rented a room because to set my own business up here, having left Williams and Farmer, and got to know the guys that owned it very well. And then one day they basically turned and said, "Look, we think we're bust, and may have to move out." And at that point, we sort of joined forces, and I suppose I bought, for the first time in 3 generations, I bought an external timber trading approach because I'd come through different companies. And we set about basically reinventing the wheel here. And anybody that thinks that we are just a timber importer that only talks to trade has got it completely wrong. We have national deals with Travis, Jewson, B&Q, Grafton Group. We supply all of their non-stock timber products. We have a big timber mill here, which most people don't know is here. So we can profile any profile that you possibly can think of in timber.
Hold on. What does profile mean? I'm very sorry.
Well, skirtings, architraves, anything with a mould on it, any shape, any size, it can all be produced here. All the cutters are made in-house by our highly skilled staff. We've just installed a new treatment facility here so we can treat wood for external use, so decking, fencing and all of that. That all happens on site. There's a 10,000 square foot trade and DIY centre on this site, which is probably Gloucester's best kept secret. Part of that is just being converted now into a flooring showroom, and that will be offering out wooden flooring to everybody, DIY and trade. And then COVID has been a complete game changer for the timber trade. We were one of those lucky industries that didn't have to close. The majors were forced to in the first lockdown. Travis, Jewson's, B&Q were forced to by the government, basically to get the message over that this was serious and big companies were being shut down. So on that first Monday after the lockdown, all the builders could keep building, but Travis's gates were closed, Jewson's gates were closed, B&Q shop was closed, and little old Nicks Timber's gates were wide open, and they just poured in. And we were the only game in town for about 6 months. And that's given us that has given us our best trading year in 165 years. And we have spent that money on replacing kit and machinery here so that we're good for in the next 50 years. And we launched an internet online shopping site during that time because everybody was doing it online. and that online shop's done £250,000 turnover in the first 5 months. So Nicks has been here 165 years because it reinvents itself, and we're reinventing ourselves about every 5 to 8 years to try and keep up with the trends. And we are happy to take someone's £10 for one piece of wood, or Travis Perkins's £150,000 turnover a month for supporting their branch network. It's all good. It's all good business for us.
What's the biggest selling product then? What is the number one thing for Nicks Timber? I always think it'd be a fence panel or something. But
well, it's constructional wood mainly, going into the builders merchant sector. That's probably our main bread and butter stock. In value terms, that used to be a relatively low value product for us. But as you probably heard it's the first time in my 40 years in the industry that timber trade has made national news. We've made BBC One headline news on the evening 10 o'clock news, because wood has become a massively scarce resource for various reasons. And that's pushed the price of timber up by 100% in 9 months. So our inflated turnover reflects that. If you think we used to sit on about £300,000 worth of stock here on this yard, that stock's now worth nearer 750,000. So the whole demographic of timber as a product to trade in has changed, become much more high value. So even the low grade stuff, like the construction timbers, massively high value, and everything else has followed it. So we specialize in high grade like cedar, larch, hardwoods, sapellis, oaks. We are a pure aisle timber only servicer for anybody. We're not a builder's merchant. We sell wood and things that relate to wood, and that's made us really now quite unique. There's not a lot of us around anymore that just do that.
Is the price, sorry, Phil, is the price going to carry on going up then? Is it going to,
the price was driven mainly by America. I mean, what you must remember is that timber is a global industry. It's not parochial. The homegrown industry in the UK services a very small percentage of the actual usage in the country. I mean, we're probably eating through, 15 million cubic meters of wood a year, of which probably 3 is homegrown and the rest is imported. That imported wood is sought by every country in the world. Canada had a really uncomfortable COVID period. They had massive fires, as you know, with the heat out there this summer. They had a lot of mill closures. Logs became a problem. And as such, America, who never shop in Europe, always shop in Canada, came to Europe looking for material. And that is what is really the catalyst for what has driven the price up, because Europe just couldn't cope with that extra demand. And therefore, it was a case of who paid the highest price got the product. And that's driven the price up. As Canada has come back on stream slightly, the price has become more stable. I would say that we've now hit the top. Prices this month won't go up. It's the first month in about 12 that they haven't. And I think we'll have a relatively stable run to Christmas now. And then the big question is whether or not it will go back down. And I actually think it will, but it won't go back down to anything like where it was. It will drop by some, but nothing like what it's come up by.
So this is obviously going to have a knock on to inflation, because we've seen through businesses, everything, all the prices are going up. The price of people's gone up, price of petrol's gone up, price of raw materials gone up. It must be really difficult if you're in construction, you're in, on a building site, trying to gauge what the price of your product is going to be to build that house, to build that shed or whatever, is extremely difficult, surely.
Well, certain products used to be on a 12-month quote. So national house builders buying roof trusses, for instance, would be on a 12-month price. That went out the window very quickly because you just couldn't be held. The inflation was too rife. Most of what we do, we probably were on 3 to 4 month price periods. We're now on basically 2 to 3 weeks price periods because it moves that quickly. So yeah, it's impossible. We have been hearing that the building trade has been quite busy in recent years. Builders normally have 2 or 3 extensions in a queue. So they would price you a job in February and tell you they'd start in October, because that's when you would become the next job that was live. We have heard that builders have had to go back to those homeowners that they priced in February, March with their £50,000 extension and go, I'm sorry, but it's 70 and there's nothing I can do about it. And that has caused a bit of a slowing down in the last few weeks as those people say, well, we just can't do that right now. Don't come until we tell you we can. And so I think that's taken a bit of the bite out of the market. And I think just the price of wood has become such a level now that it's making people think twice about what they're doing. The lockdown was just a perfect storm. People furloughed, income coming in, sitting in their gardens in the sunshine last year, building sheds, building fences, building decks, buying hot tubs. It was just a perfect storm. It isn't going to be repeated. It's a one-off, but it has moved the way wood is traded and the way people are more confident, I think, now actually to take on DIY projects than they were previous to this, because they've had a go, they had the time to have a go. And I think that's revitalized the industry slightly going forward. So I think the next decade for the timber trade is actually very positive, if I'm honest.
What would you say, Phil? What's been your, because obviously you took over the company. What year did you take over the company?
Well, we came here in 91, and we were here about 3 years when that conversation took place. So it would have been about 94, 95.
Yeah.
And basically the family, in order to get me engaged, gave me shares in the business, and maybe managing director. And I mean, it was one of those life things. It wasn't by design, it was by default. And we ran the two companies separately for a while. And then I just thought, this is just ridiculous. So we merged my company into Nicks's. And then from there, we've just gone on from strength to strength, really.
And what's been the biggest learning? What's been the biggest thing that you've learned?
If I'm absolutely honest, is think outside the box. If you think that probably Nicks's got into difficulty because they didn't, you have to think outside the box all the time, and don't think the rules that the trade operate by are applied to you. When we first took over the company, there was very little money in the business for obvious reasons. They were in difficulty. We went to one of our major mill suppliers and said, look, you don't sell Nicks's a stick of timber, but if you can fill my yard full of wood, we'll pay for it as we open each pack. We'll pay you for the pack that we open. And they agreed to that. And I mean, I must admit, it was absolute tongue in cheek, not a prayer they were going to agree to that, but they did. And as a result, they shoved so much wood in this yard that we didn't pay for. It was unbelievable. But of course, that's immensely empowering for sales because you've got it, so you can sell it. And if you're selling it on monthly terms and you're buying it on monthly terms, and you're only going to be charged when you open the pack, all of a sudden the need for liquidity in the middle of that time frame is removed. And as you sell the stock then that you've got, that you have paid for, that becomes liquidity again, because you're not having to pay to replace it. So you've got to be inventive. You've got to think outside the box. And that's a style of trading we still hang on to today in certain product lines. It's something that's it's a Nicksism. It's not usual in the trade to do it. We tried it, we got it, we proved it worked. We could then go to other suppliers and say, look, didn't spend a penny with this supplier 6 months ago. We're now spending 80,000 a month because they do this. And so we've expanded that out into other stock lines, which empowers very quick growth. If you think that we doubled the size of Nicks's in the first 2 years, and then doubled it again in the next 3, and then doubled it again in the next 5, it's immensely empowering at a time when I have to say things were in recession. And we've been through 3 here, and the last one very nearly killed us, the banking crisis. In 2012 we were getting a bit twitchy, and then the banks did what the banks were doing and came at us for guarantees we didn't want to give, and wanted to get a security on the property which we didn't want to give them, and so we went out and found a partner instead. And we went down to Cardiff and found an independent importer in Cardiff, and that gave us again a supply line to direct import through the ports. It's only an hour and a half away. They sat on £1 million worth of stock, and we said, look, we don't like our bank anymore. We want to shove it. We'll give you all our purchases if you give us an equivalent credit line to our overdraft. And they agreed, and that was it. And that company and this company, they have shares in this business now, and that company and this company work hand in hand, and it makes Nicks's not a parochial player. I'm sure everybody in Gloucester thinks we're a parochial timber company, but we deliver as far north as Newcastle, as far south as Devon, into Wales about as far as Swansea and the other side of London. So, we don't deal with national companies like Travis Jewson's and Billbase unless you can give them multiple branch coverage. And that's empowered by the access we have to raw material through the partnerships that we've made with suppliers. You can be much bigger than the sum of your physical presence if you organise it properly.
What would you say was your biggest mistake in business?
Getting in the timber trade.
You did bloody well out of it, if that was a mistake.
Up to this year, when my dad was in the industry, and my dad ran a company called Powergrave Brown in Coventry. He was a managing director for many years. And I remember in my teens, when I was sort of leaving school, I remember him coming home to me and saying, "I don't care what you do for a living, but you're not going to come in the timber trade." That was my father, who's now 91. And
but all our fathers say that, though, don't they, Nick? You know, my dad said, "Don't become a chef, crazy long hours," and in the end, he fell into it. You know.
I know I mean, I fell into it by accident. I mean, literally by accident. I got sent off for an interview by a careers master who said, "You haven't been for an interview yet, Phil. You're leaving in 3 weeks. You better go and get some interview experience. Jewson's want a commercial trainee. Why don't you just go for the chat?" You know. And I think I racked up to this bloke's office as cocky as hell, with no intention of having his job, should he even choose to offer it. And I think that confidence probably came through. And before I knew it, they whisked me off to Norwich, to head office, and Great Yarmouth, to see the boats coming in and being unloaded. And then came back and said, having put me up in the 5-star Norwich hotel, and I was sitting there on this bed, closing curtains by the button by the side of me. This is in the bloody 70s, mate. And thinking, what's my old man on about? This is all right. I can live this life. That's fine. And they offered me the job, and I started with Jewson's, and the rest, as they say, is history. But it's a great trade to be in, but financially it's not been rewarding until now. And I think the next 10 or 15 years are going to be an entirely different timber trade to be involved in.
Okay, just very quickly though, obviously you said that you just sell timber. Do you not sell the nuts, the nails and the...
Oh yeah, the DIY shop,
bits and bobs, you know.
The DIY shop sells anything that is a timber related DIY product. So ironmongery, nuts, screws, glues, finishes, stains, paints. But it is very much allied to the products that we sell. We don't sell tiles. We don't sell wallpaper. You know, we sell things that you need to do timber or projects. And the range is ever increasing. And obviously plywoods and sheet material. We have, you know, full cutting service here. So the difference between us and B&Q is, we get careful what I say because they're a customer, but the difference between B&Q and us is that we don't sell things in packs of 4. If you want one, you can buy one. If you only want a 6 foot, you haven't got to buy a 10 foot because that's what they keep it in stock. You can have the length that you want. You can have the quantity that you want. If you want it cutting to a non-standard size, we can do that. If you want a hole drilling in it, we can do that. I mean, you know, we give the customers exactly what they want in component form to make the jobs that they want to make. So we go that extra yard really to help. And through all of that process, we will advise. And the one question that all of my guys are drilled to ask is, what are you using this wood for? Because there isn't one sort of wood. There's lots of different grades of timber. And we can remove a lot of the problems for both ourselves on complaints and expectation by the client by merely saying, what is this being used for? So we can match the right product to the right end use, and then add in the services that are required to make that product work, such as treatment, if it's going to be outside and so forth and so on. So we're very, you know, every phone call is a conversation. You know, we probably resisted the online shop approach, which we set up in COVID, because we actually like that interaction with our clients. We don't want them to come on and push buttons and just print an order out our end, which we deliver. We'd rather have an interaction and a conversation. But the world has gone beyond that. There are a certain age group who do not want the conversation. They just want to be there in their underpants at midnight on their computers, ordering up a bit of wood for the weekend. And we've got to cater for all tastes. So, you know, it's all there now.
How did you know I did that, mate?
Yeah, well, they all do it.
Now, obviously, you've been in Gloucester a long time, you know, a long time, I know, and you're very passionate about the city. One of the questions I've got to ask you is nothing to do with that, because I know you're a bit of a music buff, and we don't have time to go into the theatre and the music and all the things that you do behind the scene. So we're just going to ask you, what's the last CD that you bought or download that you played?
Well, you probably know we put on the Rick Wakeman concert way back in whenever it was. Christ, must be 6, 7 years ago.
Yes,
and probably the last one I downloaded was his, to be honest, because you know, I had to make sure I was up to speed. Since then, I've been too busy to listen to music. As you know, we've had the theatre in our sights to give Gloucester back a theatre, and that's that's been given a backwards blow during COVID, as all theatre has been given a backward blow during COVID. But we're
talking about the Olympus Theatre.
Yeah, but we're back on track again with that now, and we're looking at venues to see if we can't bring that dream of giving Gloucester a theatre back to a reality. We've still got the support of all the people that we had. Simon Pegg's on board, Jeremy Irons on board. You know, we had the seats from the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. Everybody just went dead for 18 months really in the arts. But they're slowly coming back to life. We put a live show on up at Mitchenhampton about 3 weeks ago, which was 200 people came along to that. So that was a sellout. And we've got big plans for creating some theatre in the city. I'd like next year if we can, but we're going to try and create some history plays that actually tell the history of the city through plays in the streets. And that's right from Roman, right through all the various key events that the city has in its history, but put them into a piece of theatre so that people can stand, watch, learn. Because I think that for me as an outsider coming into Gloucester, and coming from Warwick, which is where I grew up, where, you know, we do have the best castle in the country, and, you know, I must have been there 5 million times. But I love all of that, that feeling of what's behind you and how people used to live where you live. And I think what I find very frustrating about Gloucester is, and I've got people work for me here in Nicks's who have been here 40 years, 45 years, 50 years. My oldest employee came when he was 15. He's now 67. He still won't bloody retire. You know, I've got people here who have been in the city all their lives, and yet I know more about the history of the city than they do. And I just find that really, really frustrating. And I think we need to get the word out to the populace of what a great historical legacy there is in this city. And they should be proud of it. I don't know how you have pride in a place where you live if you don't know the background to how it was created. And the stories are rich, as you well know. Ethelflaed, you know, Edward II, Henry III. I mean, there's highlights through every era of British history that are directly connected to this city, and including Magna Carta. And these stories.
Sorry, you must be really pleased then with Gloucester History Festival and what they're trying to achieve there. I'm kind of run out of time, unfortunately, Phil, but, you know, at least it started. But yes, you are right. I totally agree with you. Someone who's come out from the outside, so many people within Gloucester still don't know that background.
It's frustrating as hell. I mean, I asked, there's a lady I work for, I won't name her, I don't want to embarrass her, but I said to her, you know, I found that Tudor house in Westgate Street many years ago now, and said, wow, you know, I saw that Tudor house. Where's that? Where's that? And I went, you've lived here all your life. How do you not know there's this thing in Westgate Street? And the reason she didn't know was, most of the time, it was behind a closed flipping door. And that to me is just so frustrating, you know. A bit like I'm a sucker for a lost cause. Nicks's was a lost cause. We picked it up. We've turned it into something very positive. The theatre thing was a lost cause. We've picked it up. We will deliver a theatre for the city. And the whole rollout of the history and getting that out to the kids in schools and then to the population by doing stuff in the streets that tells the story. We will deliver that in time, but we'll come back on and talk about that as a separate thing when we know where we're going and get you on board with it.
I'm sure we will, Phil. I'm sure we will. So last question then, really, mate. What's your top 3 business tips?
Never give up. Keep going at all costs, you know, even if you have to really, you know, scrape it together to keep it going, because if you're not keep going forward, if you stop, that's it, you're dead. If you keep going, options will come your way, opportunities will come your way. You have to keep fighting the fight. Never give up. Think outside the box. Never be bound by what you think is the way anything works. If you think there's a better way of doing it, be vocal, be confident, be vocal. And then it's all about team, and it's building the right team around you. And everything that we do, be it the arts, be it here, we have an absolutely first-class, solid team of people who are all like-minded, and they absolutely know what the end game is. They're kept entirely in the loop on where it is you're going to, so that they can get behind you and support that. Or if they don't agree with it, they can move off and you can bring somebody else in that does. So it's a massive team effort. None of this is one person at all. Nobody achieved anything on their own. If they tell you they have, it's a lie. It's entirely down to the team around you, and build that right, and you're good to go.
Phil McCormack, MD of Nicks Timber, thanks ever so much for talking to Punchline Talks today. Cheers,
My
Nick.
pleasure. Nice to talk to you.